2% of players in mobile gaming represent 80% of the revenue. You have to have AI in your business. You have to be an AI first company that is building a product that drives 10x value.
How do you actually guarantee you're delivering 10x value? That's hard.
You have to be flexible. It's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. When I first dug into Jonathan Shroyer's background, one anecdote leapt out. As a kid, he once ran through his school hallway unprompted to defend his sister from bullies. It was your earliest act of, I think, raw leadership. He's carried that instinct forward into business. Today, Jonathan's a two-time founder, head of customer success in gaming innovation at Arise, and a recognized voice in Forbes, Fortune, in the overall customer success community. Under his leadership, Officium Labs delivered over $12 million in revenue while working with brands like EA, WB Games, Wells Fargo, and many more. He builds decentralized CX labs, integrating AI, community, human empathy at scale. He's won recognition from the UK Parliament, the Wall Street Journal, Frost & Sullivan, and many other CX groups. Today, we go deep. How do you systematize empathy? What is automation? When does automation erode trust? And how do founders build CX as a revenue engine, not just a cost center? Jonathan, welcome to the show. And what did I get wrong in that intro there?
I don't know that you got anything wrong. It sounds really nice when you say it all out loud.
Well,
but mostly it's just been a life of learning and growing and reinventing and learning and growing, failing and learning and growing.
That's the way I think every great entrepreneur is. The first question I like to ask everybody to just get started is, how do you define entrepreneurial excellence? Like, what does that actually mean, right? So you're the two-time founder. I don't know if there's other companies you don't even list on your LinkedIn. I mean, how many companies you actually founded in your course of your life? And then think through, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, an excellent entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I founded 5 companies. There's 3 that I've founded in the past 2 years that are growing. Foresight, Quimby, and I bought Linda's, but it was very small when I bought it. And then Officium Labs, which I exited. And then my first entrepreneurial opportunity was a complete bust, but it was called Blue Newt Sports back in 2009, trying to build a baseball simulation leagues with AI. So it was a little before its time. But I think, for me, it's like, what is something that can bring 10x value, whether it's entertainment value, whether it's monetary value, whatever the value is. So what's something that can bring 10x value that is an idea that I have that solves a problem that a lot of people have? And that's how I think about entrepreneurship. And I think if you think about it from that perspective, it's all about, well, what can you do for somebody else? The minute that you're an entrepreneur and you try to build something that you just are doing for yourself, or because you have an ego and you feel like, oh, it's going to be great because I thought of it, that's a failure right there. You have to think about, like, how do I build 10x value for somebody else? And if you can find something to build that 10x value after you go through an iterative process, then you have a really good opportunity.
So that makes total sense with a bunch of caveats, right? So one caveat or question I guess we have is, like, how do you identify what is 10x value to someone else? I mean, that's pretty difficult to do, right?
And I think it depends on, like, what your background, your history, and your experience is. If you're diving into the deep end of the pool with something brand new, you'll have a lot of learning to do on, like, what 10x value is. So when I purchased Linda's, I didn't know anything about crafts. It's a crafts business. Didn't know anything about e-commerce. After 17 months, we grew the business from 2 million to 12 million. But along the way, I failed a lot because I didn't actually know how to create 10x value. I had a lot of ideas. And I learned from my failures, as Nelson Mandela says, I never lose, I only win or learn. But I learned from my failures and I adapted and I figured out what 10x value meant. When you've been in a business for like 10, 15 years and you want to start up, you want to solve a problem that exists in the business, it's easier for you to identify 10x value. So when I started Officium, I knew that I could monetize video game players for companies 10x because I'd had 10, 15 years of experience in video games. And I knew exactly what needed to be solved and what the pain points were and what the language to executive leadership was to that. So I think in both cases, either you know or you don't know, and you have to be willing to learn and have a elasticity of pain to learn that.
And then how do you define what 10x value actually is? Like, I mean, 10x value sounds amazing. If you can deliver 10x value, you're going to have a guaranteed flow of customers and revenue and things like that.
Yeah.
How do you actually guarantee you're delivering 10x, like 10x value? That's hard.
Yeah. So when you think about the 10x value, you have to think about aspiration versus reality. If you shoot for the moon, you'll probably, end up hitting a pile of manure. If you end up shooting for the stars, you'll probably get to the moon, right?
I use a similar analogy sometimes for folks.
Yeah. So it's really important to say, hey, I'm going to go after that 10x. So every business, every idea I have, I may only get 4x, I may only get 6x, but still those are really good, ROIs. So what I do, I'll give you a couple examples. So with Linda's, 10x value was the business was 2 million. Now the business is 12 million 17 months later. So I've 6x the value of that business, right? That's an example of how to increase it. So that's if you're an e-commerce owner and you want to buy a business and grow a business. If you're a technology company, so I founded Officium, and Officium essentially started with nothing, bootstrapped, sold it 2 years later for 22. And the way that I sold it and the way that I created that value is there's a problem in video games where video game companies couldn't effectively monetize their highest paying players. And so what I did is, hey guys, spend $1 million here on me and everything I'm doing, and I'm going to deliver you $7, $10, $12 million in accretive revenue. And so that's what we do.
Good deal.
Yeah. So that's what we did with Officium is we put the people, process, and tech in place in order for the brands that you mentioned earlier to be able to get that accretive value. Like that's another example. I think a third example to think about is one of the companies that I own right now, Foresight Ads, which, we just came out of stealth a month ago and we have like 25 clients now. But the challenge that they're facing is these e-commerce D2C mid-market companies, 3 to 50 million GMV. What they're facing is they're kind of in this cash trap because they want to acquire customers, but you can't acquire as many customers as they want because they only have so much working capital and it's expensive to acquire customers. And so the LTV payback is too long. Mm-hmm. Like maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes 2 years. So what Foresight does is it essentially shrinks that LTV payback to one order with our AI agentic technology. So essentially you're taking this company who had to wait a long period of time to scale to now they can scale effortlessly because what you're doing yourself is providing first order profitability. So every order is profitable. And from their perspective, that means they can scale 6 to 10x.
Even still, just to keep pressing this, like, how do you actually identify or get like an idea? Like, how do you know it's going to be a 10x? Like, these are good examples of things obviously you decided, but is there a general kind of playbook you have for how you go about identifying is something 10x? Because lots of people think their entrepreneurial idea is a 10x idea, but I don't think they really know what that means or how to really identify it. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think the way that I think about it is I come up with an idea and then I'm like, this is a problem. I do some of my own research to identify like how big of a problem is this? Is this like a quarter problem? Is this like $100 billion problem? And I'm like, okay, so it's a $10 billion problem. So let me come up with an idea that involves tech, people, process, whatever the solution is. And then let me test this idea on a business. So I have a network of individuals, right? So I was like, hey guys, can I test this? Or I have some businesses I own. I test it out. I'm like, oh, interesting. So this idea provided some accretive value to my current test subject, whatever it was. Let me iterate it. Let me make it a little bit more marketable, put it into a more polished state, and let me go and get some beta testers and give them the product for free. All right. And say, okay, can I test this product, this idea on your business? So I test the product, the idea on their business. I can continue to do iteration. I learn, I see what works. I see what doesn't work. I fine tune it. And then at the end of the 90 to 180 day period, I'm like, okay, so for those 5 new customers, this is the kind of polished product that gave us the highest accretive value, assuming it does. If it doesn't, then you end it, right? It's not going to work. But let's say it does. So then you're like, okay, so let me go to market to get traction beyond those 5 customers.
Those customers are paying. They're like, we love this. This is awesome. You've done something that
you've changed the world. It's super valuable.
Best thing I've ever had.
Yeah, it's sticky. It's the best thing I've ever had. So then you go and you say, okay, well, let me try to sell it actually, because I gave it to those customers for free and now they're willing to pay, but let me actually just try to sell it on the market. So then you go to market and you try to sell it you know, pound the pavement, you hustle, you get 15, 20 customers, right? Which is where Foresight is right now, right? 25. And then they pay for it, and then you iterate further and you learn on that first data set of 20 to 25. So like even what Foresight was in the beginning of November to November 20th, 20 days later, we've changed because we're learning for those 20 customers what's going to easily scale and be digestible and make it, where that value is obvious. And so then you learn and you're like, okay, great. Now I have traction. Do I want to bootstrap this and continue to grow it slowly? Or is this something that if I had the right amount of money, I could create a moat around? So if this is something, if I have the right amount of money, I create a moat and it's impactful. I have customer testimonials. I have traction. I have revenue. Then you go to talk to angels, seed investors, speed run, those types of things, right? And then you get an idea of like, hey, do they think it's investable? Not that is it a great idea, but do they think it's investable?
Why is that important, right? A lot of companies are trying to bootstrap nowadays.
Well, I think it's important because if it's an investable product, you want to be first to market, or you want to be seen as somebody that is doing something nobody else is doing. If you bootstrap for too long, somebody else has cash. There's a lot of smart people in the world. They're eventually going to figure out what you're doing. No matter how smart you think you are, somebody else is smarter and they'll eventually figure it out. And so I think it's important for you to weigh the pros and the cons of like, how fast do I want to go to market and build a moat versus, hey, how much do I want to give up of my company? And I think a lot of founders don't want to give up anything of their company. They want to own it themselves. And I always say that if you want to grow and scale, you have a team. And some of the team is paid with cash, some of the team is paid with equity, some of the team invests in your business, but you need a network and a team around you, especially if you have a 10x value idea, to scale it, build a moat and grow. And then also to help you think about the things that you don't know, which there's a ton of stuff I don't know, right? Which is why I have advisors that I give shares to, why I have investors that they give me money, I give them shares. You got to surround yourself with a team if your true goal is to scale 10x, 20x, 30x. Now, if your goal is just to create like, hey, I got an idea, I went through all that process that Jonathan just talked to, I just want to create a nice life for my family, and you're not worried about scaling, then great, bootstrap, take a loan, whatever it is that you want to do. It depends on what your goals are.
Of course. So Jonathan, you talked a little bit about deciding to essentially like raise money to build and know that you have something that has a moat that you can kind of create. How do you know if you have something that is, in a sense, moatable? I don't know if that's a word, but that can actually have a moat. And especially like, one, just in general, how do you identify it? Two, how do you identify that in the world of AI? Because to me, no moat lasts for a very long time. There's all these companies that are growing at 1,000, 10,000% a year, like just ridiculous numbers. To me, that is not, they can't have a moat. It's not possible. If they create something that's that good, someone else can build it probably pretty fast and get into market and compete with them. And yet they're raising crazy money at crazy valuations. So what does it even mean to have a moat? Or how do you identify that moat and build it and make it sustainable?
So I think it's a really great question. And definitely with the disruption of AI, having a moat is much more challenging than it was in the past. I think the way that I would share is that if you don't have AI in your business, you're never going to create a moat. Now, so you have to have AI in your business. You have to be an AI first company that is building a product that drives value, 10x value, right? And so if you don't have AI in your business, just go ahead and shut your business down, because somebody else is going to shut it down for you fairly soon. It doesn't mean that AI is what your customers care about. AI is essentially going to be what you need to care about, because that's how you can become competitive. And you have to stay on top of the trends. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or if you're a vibe coder building your business. You just have to stay on top of everything and anything that's going on, and leveraging AI each and every day for hours upon a day to ensure that you can continue to innovate and protect your business. The first thing is you have to have AI built into your business if you build them each day. So the second thing is you have to determine, is your product going to do something significantly different than what's on the market today? Is your product new to the market, like nothing of it like it exists today? And does your product provide more value, like significantly more value that would encourage a customer to say, I'm going to change what I'm doing now to go to what you're doing. And so an example of this is when I created Foresight, there were a lot of point solution tools that were doing ads, or they're doing flows, or they're doing CTV, but none of them were connecting all of that and creating an identity and using an AI agentic brain to be able to understand who the customer is, when they're most likely to come online, and how you can target them to increase monetization and decrease cost of acquisition or retargeting. Nobody was doing that. And so the moat that we're creating with Foresight is to say, hey, we're a brain that unifies all of these different layers, that hyper personalizes and targets your hard-earned working capital to get the biggest bang for the buck, or for the ROAS, right? And so the moat that we're creating there is saying everybody else is here, but none of them are doing all of this for you. So let us do all this for you. So that was the first thing that we did. The second thing is you have to identify, who are you going after? Like, for example, if I were to take Foresight to Fortune 100 companies, it would not succeed, right? Because those Fortune 100 companies have hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget, and they don't care as much about movement points and ROAS. So I said, well, let me take Foresight to the $3 to $50 million GMV customers, because they're the folks that are cash trapped, that can't scale and don't know how to solve this problem and don't have the war chest to solve this problem. So you've got to pick who is your customer base that's most likely going to monetize and be sticky. So that's the second thing that I think you have to recreate the moat. And then I think the third thing is you have to go and do that process that I mentioned earlier, where you go through that iterative process to even figure out if you can get a moat. Like, are customers telling you that they're going to switch? Are customers excited? Are customers being sticky? Are you bringing that value either, subjectively or objectively to that client, to where they trust you and you've become, the next best thing to gold for them? And so I think those are three things beyond the AI first, which is super important to figure out the moat piece.
Yeah, absolutely fair. All right, no, that's helpful and good to think through kind of that 10x value in the moat areas. Walk me through like some of your overall entrepreneurial journey stories. Like, where did you get started? How did this even become a thing? Like, how did you get into being an entrepreneur in the first place? Like, what was it from you when you went to protect your sister to becoming an entrepreneur? What was that journey?
That's interesting. It's very good research that you did. Not very many people know that one. I think I never intended to be an entrepreneur. Like, it was never my goal. And I think, I grew up in a relatively poor household.
Hey, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Georgia and Texas.
Okay.
And we just didn't have a lot of money. There's 10 kids.
Wow.
And, my dad, might have made $30,000 to $50,000 a year in the early days. He makes a little bit more later, and so we just didn't have a lot of money. And so security became like instilled in me. Like, when I go out on my own, I need to have security. And so what I got kind of enamored by with my first job, with Convergys, and then when I got recruited to work for Microsoft and other big tech companies, was like, hey, this is security. I have a full-time job. I'm doing fun and interesting things. I have benefits. I've got stock. I've got security. And what it kept, so I was in my mid 30s. It happened all throughout my career. I kept every company, I kept bumping into this tension where I wanted to move faster. I wanted to do things differently and more innovative than the system that I was inside of. And eventually, in all of those cases, I ended up parting ways with these companies because I just got frustrated, because like I couldn't move and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so one day my wife said, I think this was when I was like 35, so 12 years ago. My wife said, hey, why don't you just go work for a startup? It's clear that you have enormous amount of frustration with these big tech companies. So just go pick a startup. And so then I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And so I joined Postmates in the early days, and it was growing 10% per week, which is insane. Yeah. Insane.
Can't even imagine.
And I drank from the fire hose for almost 2 years with Postmates. And it was like a PhD education, because Postmates was so fast. It's not your normal startup. And so I just learned a ton. But when I learned,
did your wife think, when she didn't see you for 2 straight years, did she think that was actually good? She pushed you to go do that?
Well, she did say, it's like, well, you didn't have to choose like the highest velocity startup.
I mean, why not? That's exactly what you should choose, arguably. If you're getting into it, go get that full education.
But I mean, I learned so much from that. Probably the best 2 years of education that I've had kind of in my career. And what I loved about it was every day was a different problem. Every day it was like consistently solving problems, figuring out value, optimizing. It was just like this constant movement. And I have autism, and so I tend to be like really focused on like how do you solve these big problems, move fast, iterate, move fast, go 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 go. And so it really fed that part of my brain, which takes in massive amounts of information, deciphers it fairly quickly, comes up with a solution and execute, right? And so I was like, okay, this startup life is for me. And so then I went up to a couple other different startups after Postmates to learn different viewpoints. I went to a gaming startup, Kabam, which sold to Netmarble for $1 billion. And I was like, well, why don't I start my own? So that's when I started Officium, my second startup. But that's when I got the courage after the first one folded. I was like, well, let me go after this now that I've learned all.
It was the idea in that case, once again, like you've learned all these things and you want to see if you can do it yourself. Was it like chip on your shoulder or?
Not necessarily chip on the shoulder. It was more of like, hey, do I bet on myself and the accretive value that I bring to my life is 10x or 20x? Or do I keep betting on somebody else who gets to take all that value for themselves? Right. And then do I have full control over my ideation, my execution, what we do, right? And so that's what it was about. And so, yeah, so I started Officium. I had an idea. I took it to market. We were profitable in a month. Like I said, we went from 0 to 22 in 2 years. And then I was like, this is fantastic. And so then I started thinking about, well, what's next? What's the next thing as I help the acquiring company, grow out post Officium?
Why even sell if it was growing that fast? What made you decide to sell?
Well, it was interesting. So I have a lot of advisors, and this is 2021. And all of my advisors said, this is the year to sell. They said, if you don't sell this year, you're probably not going to be able to sell till 27 or 28. And they were spot on. And so I was like, and so I said, okay, I'm going to sell. And I probably got the highest value that I'd get at that point with the sell. And so, and then I kind of hung out for a couple of years, figured things out. And I was like, oh, what do I want to do next? Right. And so that's when I got into the e-commerce business with Linda's. And then when I saw that problem with Linda's, with the ad tech acquisition LTV piece, and I was like, okay, then I'll create Foresight, solve the Linda's problem. And then I went through that whole process that I outlined earlier before I created Foresight and so forth. And then I created Quimby, which is a gaming AI tech thing, which we haven't talked about. But again, it's all about building, scaling, innovating, and just learning. From that perspective.
Yeah. And like, how did you end up becoming like kind of big into customer success, like CX being a thing that I think you're more and more well known for?
Yeah. Well, I started off on the phones. I was doing customer service in 97, 98, and 99. I was providing support for, Excel 97, Microsoft, Millennium, So I started off on the phones. I've always had like this customer service, customer success kind of ethos. Some people are built certain ways. I've always been like the helper.
Although you mentioned that you're on a more autistic scale. So like that must be tough. I feel like a lot of autistic people would be tough to be on phones.
Yeah, it was tough. And so, I found out after kind of 2 years that I was really good at it, but it just took an enormous amount of energy from me, like maybe 3 or 4 times more than it would take from you, right? And so then I was like, well, can I go find an analytical role? I think that I'd be really good. So then inside of the company, I applied for an analytical role and I got it. And then from then on out, I was never customer facing. Like I never talked to customers unless it was like an escalation. But then I focused on analytics, operational process, things that I was good at, and then putting people in place that were good at those other things so that I could double click into my strengths and then let my team double click into theirs. But it was a good learning, kind of piece.
And so how do you like define great customer experience in a sentence? Like, what does it look like?
Does a customer want to come back and use your brand every day because they feel like they can't live without it? It's like your Starbucks cup of coffee. Do they have an affinity with your brand? If the answer is yes, then you've achieved amazing customer success and amazing customer service and amazing product fit.
Is there a certain metric you look at or you think is best to pay attention to track that affinity?
I think in B2C, what you're looking at is in the gaming space where you have, digital engagement, is that player coming back every day? And a B2C kind of e-commerce brand is how often does that customer come back to our website to browse and to look around? And then how often do they spend? You're looking at a B2B standpoint is what are the renewal rates? And what's the retention rates? Are we growing the wallet share, the B2B business? Those are some examples.
Are there certain like CX things that you think founders should like miss almost? Founders should stop believing in?
Yeah, I think that founders should stop believing that they can solve CX later once they solve revenue. That's like the number one problem that founders have is they just don't focus on customer experience. They don't think about the customer all the time. They think about their great idea. And this is every founder is not like this, but a lot are. And so you have to think about and this is why I say go through that process to see if your customers, what's the so what for your customers? Make sure your customers are really bought into this and that you're building something that's meaningful and interesting to them from the beginning. So have either somebody in your founding team or somebody with the mindset of I'm going to put on the customer hat in every meeting. And if you do that, then you're more likely to build a scalable product that will be successful.
So on that note, walk me through how you build a great CX mindset in a company. What does that actually look like? What are the steps? How should I go about doing it? As a founder, I have so many things on my plate. So how do I go about doing that as a founder?
I think you can start off with small and simple things. It sounds like a big thing, what you just said. It sounds really complex. And if you try to boil the ocean, then you'll never do anything. And so I think if you start off with 3 simple things, the one is always take the customer's point of view in a meeting, which I just mentioned. The second one is to go and talk to customers that aren't customers. So in other words, people that could be customers and say, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want your advice on this. I just want to learn, what do you think? And the third one is just consistently do research, pay for the research. When I bought Linda's, I paid, $5,000 for this extensive research. But that research helped me understand, is this business scalable? Do customers want this business? How fragmented is the business? How large is the opportunity? So don't be afraid to pay for data that will inform you to not jump into puddles.
And then are there any other things beyond just once you're in there and you've done your research, you have a customer success going, you're talking to customers, are there other tools or steps that you should do to be successful there?
Yeah, I think the 2 other things I would do is be super responsive to your customers.
So why both of those things? So I agree with both and I don't think people would question it, but why does it take you calling out being responsive as a critical thing? Why is that? To me, I'm saying it's sort of default obvious, but obviously it's not. Otherwise you wouldn't have said it.
So when I work with companies, the companies that engage back with me with less than a day, I stay working with those companies because I have trust that if I have a problem, they're going to solve the problem. But companies that take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days to respond to me, I'm I love their product, but there's nobody to talk to. How do I get engagement if I have a problem? I'm just going to go to another company that will talk to me because I just want to talk. If I have a problem, I just need the problem solved. So that, and yes, it is logical, but 70% of companies don't do it.
Yeah. Why don't they do it? Where did they go wrong?
They get focused on the wrong things, which is, hey, I got to spend all my time on fundraising. I got to spend all my time on product. I got to spend all my time on, engineering, marketing. So they do all of these things to acquire the customer and get the customer excited about the product, but then they don't take care of the customer.
How difficult is it for them, to sort of take care of the customer? Why is that hard for them?
Because they don't have the mindset to where the customer should be first. Anytime. So yesterday I got a customer escalation that came in at 9:10. I respond to that customer escalation at 9:15 at night. Right? Because I know that if I respond to that customer, and even if I don't have the perfect answer, that customer will be oh my gosh, Jonathan and all of his busy days, everything that he's doing, he responded to me in 5 minutes and we're going to get on the, so then I give myself 3 days. So I don't actually have to talk to the customer for 3 days, and that gives me 3 days to figure things out. But if you don't respond to the customer until you feel like you have the resolution, and the customer's sitting there for 3 days and getting anxious and getting frustrated and so forth. So you have to have that mindset of if you were the customer and you had a problem, wouldn't you want your problem resolved? And you just have to have that mindset, and people just don't have that mindset.
It's funny. We talk about that a lot at Shore, about how essentially we're not actually in the problem-solving game. We're actually in the anxiety reduction game. And to reduce anxiety, you just need to let someone know that you're on it. You need to respond quickly saying, we have your back. We're taking care of it. We see you. And then, yes, as you said, you can take a few days to actually get to a resolution, but it's been very difficult to train our team that way because like, well, I want to give them a full answer. I'm like, well, no. You have to first give them a response to make sure they understand what's happening. And then sure, do the research, but it's just a different mindset for a lot of people. And I think very difficult sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the second thing, which is the resolution, is if you don't resolve customers' issues, they're not going to stay with your product. So you eventually have to resolve it. And in the analytic studies that we've done is companies that resolve 80 to 95% of customers' issues have a retention and a rebuy rate 3 to 4 times X of companies that don't resolve issues that often.
When you say don't resolve issues, I would imagine every company resolves issues. So like who's not resolving issues and what does that even mean?
No, not every company resolves issues. So you have to think about this from a company's perspective. A customer comes in and says, hey, I've been using your product. I'm having this problem. I'm having this problem. I'm having this problem. They get a response back and say, hey, thanks for the feedback. We'll send it to our dev team and let you know. And then crickets. And then I chase again. And I'm like, hey, I hadn't heard back from you. It's been 3 weeks. Could you tell me? Oh, the dev team says that it can't be done. Now, in reality, I know that it can be done because I know that back into almost every product dev. Like, I know that it can't be done. And so the fact that they're telling me that it can't be done means that they don't want to do it. And so then they're making a conscious choice that they don't care about my business because they don't want even to do one of the 3 things that I mentioned to them, right? And in some cases, it's okay. You don't have a lot of money. You can only do so many things. You can't solve all of my problems, but you have to solve one of my problems. And so if you're unwilling to solve one of my problems, then I become 100 customers, 1,000 customers, and you're doing the same thing for every customer. You're telling the customer to fit into your box rather than flexing your box to include the customer, then you're going to lose customers.
100%. How do you make sure then that you do that flex? Because so many companies, they are unable or unwilling to build the flexible mindset for that. And why isn't it? Like, this is to me it's probably a low cost thing. If you get this right, it's a low cost way to juice your revenue, juice your returns, everything else. So why do founders fail on this front? Is it just because it's not as sexy? Like what's missing when you're talking about this stuff? This once again seems like a no brainer to me, but is it why is it not that case for most founders?
The way that I would kind of explain it is I'm looking outside of my backyard and there's a fairly large tree. It's a beautiful tree. It's, 500, whatever feet, I don't know, maybe it's 100 feet high, expansive, has deep roots into the ground and movable. And then I'm also looking out and I see a potted plant. So what most founders are the tree and not the potted plant. So you can't move the tree. So if your mindset is, this is the product, I'm building this, I know what's right for customers, I'm not going to be flexible, I'm not going to do it, you're going to become the tree. And you'll get some customers. But if you're the potted plant and you're like, hey, I'm going to move around until I figure out where I should actually plant the plant. And then I'm going to kind of grow, but make it flexible to where it's a large garden where I could plant other things and other features and bring it into a larger ecosystem rather than just the tree. I mean, that's the difference. Is like, what type of a mindset are you? And what happens too often is 90% of humans are not flexible and are not adaptable. And because of that innate problem, when they hear this feedback, they're not innately like, oh, let me be flexible and let me help the customer. They're like, no, that's okay. If we lose that customer, that's not a big deal because I'm doing what's right. I'm doing what I think is the right. And so I think that's the big challenge.
Are we not flexible, or 90% of people not flexible or adaptable because it hurts your ego to admit you could be wrong? Like, what is the reason underlying that you thought through? It's like psychologically.
Well, it's ego is one. The second is it's hard to be flexible. Like, it's super difficult. Like you and I are having this conversation and you're hitting me up with questions left and right, that were unplanned. And I'm a pretty flexible guy. And so I can roll with it either way. But if I was like regimented and, felt like I had to be prepared for every possible question that you would hit me with and have an answer, like this call wouldn't be going as well. Right. Because then I would get stymied. I'd get frustrated. I'd get, you know what I mean? And so you have to be flexible. It's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the most adaptable.
Yeah. Walk me through. Let's go into customer success in gaming, since it's an area you know really well. I think from what I understand, like gaming customers can be very vocal, pretty unforgiving. Is that almost a great training ground for really, really good customer success? Like, what does that actually really, really mean?
Well, I think gaming's such an interesting area.
And how did you get into gaming again? Like, why did that become your thing?
So I worked on the original Xbox with Microsoft. So and I've always been kind of a gamer. I used to do these cat, one parties back in 2001, 2002. And it was so much more fun to have, 5 Xboxes inside of the house with 5 different TVs than it is now with all the online stuff.
I mean, I was playing networked, shows my age a little bit. I was playing networked Halo.
Yeah,
Halo,
that's what we did.
Halo 1 networked in my college dorm on the whole floor because it was all in the same network. And so we could play in our dorm rooms, but play each other. We just had the doors open and everyone would be screaming. And, that rocket launcher would hit your warthog and all the other good stuff.
Yep. Right. That's the best. You can't recreate that with the way things work now. But yeah, I mean, and so I started then. And so I've always been into gaming. Gaming actually, it's actually therapeutic for my autistic side because it helps my brain to really think about problem solving, which is where problem solving is relaxing to me. So, dealing with emotions is not relaxing. And so it actually is a nice place to problem solve, relax, and figure things out. So it's really good for my brain.
What games do you love right now? Like, what's your favorite game?
Since 1989, I've been playing Civilization.
Great game.
And all of its iterations. I'm in Civ 7 now. And I for better or worse, this was before I had my son, but Steam is always very good at telling you how many hours you played the game. And so I logged in one day, I think it was Civ 5, and I'd played like 2,000 hours that year. So it's just, I'd love Civ. I'm a big basketball fan. You can't tell, but I'm 6'4", 6'5". And so I played basketball in high school. And so I love NBA 2K.
Yeah, great game.
I love that game. Yeah, those are my two ones that I kind of go to now because of the timing. I only have so much time with my 4-year-old. But yeah.
Do you have any hot takes on where the gaming market's going right now? And what I mean is like with like Steam, Xbox, PS5, even virtual worlds, things like that. Any hot spicy takes?
Well, I mean, the industry right now is at an interesting struggle point. So it was growing 4, 6, 12% CAGR year over year. It's kind of flattened out a little bit. And I think that they're trying to figure out, how AI plays a role on gaming. They're trying to figure out, now that there's so many competitive eyeballs. So a gamer's competitive person is not another gaming company. It's Facebook, it's Insta, it's TikTok, it's all of these other things. It's not necessarily another gaming company. And so they're trying to figure out, well, how do we continue to grab that attention and so forth and keep folks playing? And then, there's a lot of games that are in the Web3 space that are trying to figure themselves out. It's taken them 4 or 5 years. And then all the data issues that have happened of late and the ability to sell outside of Google and inside of Google. There's just so much disruption that's happening in the gaming space today. And so, players may not see the disruption as much. They just want to play a game that they like. And so it's an interesting space. I do think that at some point, this PS5 that I have over here will no longer be necessary. I'll just be my internet will be strong enough and the graphics on my TV will be great enough to just do everything over the television.
Aren't we already there? I mean, you have like NVIDIA, I forget what gaming cloud's called that they have.
In some cases you can. There's still there's a number of games that you just can't play online right now. The fidelity's not, like NBA 2K. You'd never be able to play that online. The fidelity's not there. So if you have a medium quality game, and I don't mean that like negative, but like from
like Civilization should work really well, right? It's slow paced.
Civilization works fine. Civ is fine. But if you have a number of the shooter games, I mean, those won't work.
Yeah.
You have any latency on those things, and then it's going to go crazy.
How far away are we from a real time generated personalized gaming world just for me? That's like being generated almost on the fly by AI.
3 years.
Okay. Soon. So the holodeck is coming soon.
Yeah. 3 years.
That's a very definitive answer. So 2028.
Yeah, it's going to come. It's not, I'm not going to create it, but I have people that are working in the industry and it will be created.
Yeah, no, I'm quite sure. So okay, so sorry to take that segue. So one thing, going back to the customer success differences between like regular people and gaming folks, e-commerce or B2B folks. What are the key things like velocity of feedback, toxicity, retention?
So I think that the way you have to look at is the heuristics of your customer. And the heuristics of a gaming customer is so much different than the heuristics of an e-commerce customer or a SaaS customer for, Microsoft or whatnot. In gaming, it's probably the most complex heuristics that you can have. And I'll give you an example of this. So 2% of players in mobile gaming represent 80% of the revenue.
Yeah, I've heard that. You do whales, right? Is what they call them.
Yeah, they're whales. The psychology that it takes to spend $500,000 a year on a game as a player, that essentially once the game ends, your whole investment in that game ends, is so much different than the psychology of somebody that's buying crafts online. And so I remember when I worked for a mobile gaming company and I was the head of service at the time, and I started reaching out to these whales so that I can engage with them, understand them, think through like what their challenges are, how to monetize them. This is before, Officium. So I would give these whales, my email address and we'd contact back and forth. And then one day it was like 4 weeks into the company. So I was answering every mobile phone call that I got. And one day I got a mobile phone call. I didn't know the number, but I picked it up. And on the other side, it says, "Hey, my name is Jace. I'm player X468, whatever, And I was like, and I've been playing the game and I'm loving the game. And so while he's chatting with me, I just pull up my laptop so I could see who
he actually is.
It's like, okay, he spent $250,000 in the last year in the game, so I'm definitely going to listen to whatever. And so I just chat with him, and he's like, "Hey, how do I get past this level? Can you give me like any inside information so that I can win here, do this? Like, can you give me a special op?" Like he was asking for all these things. And so what's interesting is that type of a mentality where you'll call somebody up who has a perception of power to help you, and you're hoping that will help you get ahead. Well, what most people don't realize about that mentality is they're trying to be, the Mike Tyson and Michael Jordan of that game. That's what their goal is. And they're willing to spend the money to do that. So when it's a game of inches, they'll take any inch they can get to outbeat their competitors and to claim online that they're number one in the world at this game. Now, that's a way different mentality than a player in the game that's never spent a dime, that comes in, plays 30 minutes, does all the free stuff, hits the paywall and says, "I'll come back tomorrow."
Yeah.
And so those are totally two different demographics, and there's all kinds of demographics in between.
And don't you want to get those people who don't spend a dime? You want to move them to paying a dime.
Well, you want to move them to that, but you also want to keep them playing the game because you need them to play the game for the 2% to be Michael Jordan.
Right. Michael Jordan could be Michael Jordan if the NBA didn't exist, basically.
That's right. Exactly. Or subpar teams didn't exist. Right. And so I think it's interesting to think about it from that perspective. So that demographic, there's like, 8 major personas in gaming, but one of them is that high-end persona demographic. And then the other one is the free demographic. And they're both fine. They're both great people. I'm glad that they're all playing, right? Nothing against any of them. But when you're trying to build a gaming company, you have to focus on the people who spend the money. And so then you focus on the wells. And so what I would say is if you have a Michael Jordan mentality of somebody that's in the game, like you have to pay attention to that mentality. And sometimes that mentality is unreasonable. And so what you'll find, so the example of this player is I didn't give him anything. I just listened to him. And I said, "Yeah, just reach out to me if you ever want to talk again." And then I just watched his spend in the game after that call, and it grew by 30%. Just because I had a call with him and basically listened to him as if he was important, right? And so then he calls me like, I don't know, 4 months later, different phone number. And so I didn't know it was him. So I picked up And he's like, hey man, like I'm at the hardest level in the game. And I'm looking at the clock and I know he lives in Israel. I'm like, dude, should you be asleep? He's like, oh, it's okay, man. I'm on vacation in India, but it's still 2 a.m. here, but it's okay. Everybody's asleep. I don't want my wife to know that I'm trying to do, cause she's been getting on to me about this. I was like, can you just kind of give me a leg up, And so again, I just listened to him, gave him nothing. And then he was complaining to me about things in the game. And he was frustrated with it. And I was listening. I'll take your feedback. Thank you. I'll bring it to the dev team. And of course, down the path, the dev team rolls out a few things. And so he's like, okay, my voice mattered, kind of.
Yeah.
And so that psychology of like, hey, how do you engage that psychology and keep them playing the game, but without giving away too much, right? Will be a different psychology of like, hey, how do I talk to this free player to get them to spend money?
Yeah.
And so I think this is why AI is so powerful in gaming now, is because in the old days, that psychology difference was hard to cross that chasm. But now with AI and with one of my companies, Quimby, is I actually have the ability to understand the DNA of every player in the game and then to predict and project what activity the game studio should do to interact with that particular player to get them to do that next step engagement of what you want them to do. Right. Yeah. And so then it's much easier to do that across, Asana as an example, or Microsoft products, because they're less complex. The demographics are a lot similar. The buyers are a lot similar. But if AI can do that, then it's all about, hey, what's the high value customer success? Getting back to your question, the high value customer success touch points that I can have that will increase rebuy, increase retention. So I'm not focusing on the minutia. The AI is doing all that. I'm focusing on what are the activities that are going to be perceived to be 10x for them or actually be 10x for them.
And then speaking about like prioritizing like fixes or issue updates, how do you decide as a founder which customer requests to prioritize? Like, what's your heuristic, right? Okay, well, is it because this guy who's spending it is one of your whales is asking for it? Is that a bigger reason? Like, what do you do to prioritize updates?
So I think if your business is a well-driven business, you have to pay attention to your whales. That has to be a priority. Like, which customers are going to help you scale your business, at least in the near term. If you're creating a wedge, then great, pay attention to the whales. But if your business is more like, hey, all the customers, there's an elevating level of payment, but they're not too far apart from each other. Then you look at, well, what are the most common issues that come up? And am I hearing this problem or this tension from multiple customers? Or is this causing a lot of unnecessary churn on my team where they're wasting time on things that they shouldn't be wasting time on? Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because these problems are existing.
Do you track this in like Jira or something like that?
You track it in Jira. And then you have data to tell you like, hey guys, we talked to 4 customers. They're all having the same problem. And like I had this issue this week with Foresight where I had 5 customers ask the same exact question. And so I was like, guys, we have 25 customers. 5 customers have asked the same question. Let's put an updated announcement out to the entire platform to answer their question. And then let's help them see things a little bit differently so they understand that there's a bigger picture to their question. Their question is a component of what the actual solve is. So let's help them understand that. And so we did that. And then immediately, and we offered to have a meeting with any of the clients that they wanted to walk through it. And then immediately we had 4 or 5 clients schedule a meeting with me so that we can walk through it. Right. And so you have to understand, well, what's the data telling you and how fast can you react to that data? And by the way, my team is getting bogged down with these requests and trying to respond to them, and it's taking hours, whatever, and I don't want my team wasting time on that. I want them to build high value activities, engagements with customers. So we have to figure out like, how do we remove that administration?
So maybe that's a great sort of segue into like building systems, scaling them, and maybe decentralized talent as well. Cause I think, you, I believe, are somebody who thinks about decentralized talent networks a bit. And so how do you deal with that? How do you find talent? What's your hiring heuristics? How do you try to hire? How do you try to build teams that can scale? Like what you have to put systems in place to do that.
The first thing you got to do is you got to really get, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 kind of founding members, you got to get a really strong group of individuals that have different skill sets or different capabilities and have grit.
One, maybe for the audience, define grit for us. And then how do you identify grit in a person?
So from my perspective, grit is the ability to be hit with anything and come up with a solution, and not let it affect your psyche, not let it like, oh, I'm doing a bad job. Let go of all that. Everything's a learning. Okay, so I've got grit. I got hit with these 10 problems. Let me figure out how to solve the problems. So am I going to go and solve the problems, or am I going to sit in pity? Right? Or even if I'm halfway in between, like those aren't helpful. Like you have to be focused on logical problem resolution all of the time, and you can take nothing personal. And you have to be able to do that. Like you can't let your emotions take over. It doesn't mean that you can't have emotions. Just release them in your own way, and don't let them overtake your decision making inside of a company or even in life. If you have grit, like, early on having autism was hard, and there was a lot of grit early on. When I was growing up, I was abused, and there was a lot of aftermath that came from that. But I had the grit to be like, I'm gonna keep going, right? And it's this idea of like tomorrow is always going to be better. Hope is always there. So let me latch on to that. The answer is always out there. So let me go find the answer. I'm not going to sit right here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stay where I'm at. So I think that's my definition of grit. I think if you're trying to find people that, are grit related individuals, you have to find people that have had like really tough projects that they've worked on in their life. And they explain to you, like, how did I overcome that tough project? How did I solve it? Whether I solved it or not, like, how did I think about solving it? I think Nick Saban says the process to win is better than the win itself.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, what process did you go through? Did you think through to solve that problem?
Yep.
And so I think understanding that, and then if you get individuals who have that grit, have that experience, and it really helps if you have founders that are over the age of 40, because they've been through a lot of experience in their life. They know who they are. They know who they're not. Generally, their egos are a little bit more moderated, not all the time, but generally. So then you can have a collaborative team as well. I mean, that's super, super important.
And actually, it's interesting you say the founders over 40. So let's talk about that for a second. Do you have a bias, obviously, for something like for hiring and building a team you do, founders over 40? Is that the same as like investing? If you do any investing, like you want to focus on older founders? Because there's lots of people who would say, well, the young founders are the ones, especially nowadays, the AI they are more focused on AI. They understand AI better. They have fewer distractions in life. Like, you and I have kids, things like that. Like there's a lot of distractions in my life. And yet a young person can go work all the time and they don't know what they can't do and not do. Whereas I've had that experience. So they're kind of, the sky's the limit for them. The other argument, I don't agree with all that, obviously.
Well, I think that it kind of depends on like, is it your money or is it somebody else's money? So like, how much risk are you willing to take with your money versus somebody else's money? If you're in a venture capitalist firm and you're the person who decides whether we should invest or not, you can take some big swings, and if it doesn't happen, it's okay because you've got pretty good backing, right? And so, in some cases, people without experience that have great ideas grow in to great leaders, or they grow into a great exit opportunity. What I find with my own money is I want to have somebody that not only the product market fit is there, but I also can trust that they can execute through the most challenging times, and that they've had some of those, difficulties in the past that they've overcome, right? I think that the data that I read was for companies of founders that are over 40 versus companies of founders that are under 40, the exit for the over 40 founders are about 3x of value of the exit of the under 40 founders. So I'm not discouraging anyone to be a founder under 40 for sure. Go after it, do it. But from my perspective, like if I was to found a company, which I did, found a company in my 20s and it flopped. I just didn't have enough experience for me. Like somebody may, but for me, I didn't. And by the time I started Officium, I was 38, 39, and I had a ton more experience, and I knew like how to perform and operate way better than I did. And so I think most people over 40 have a more life experience and more professional experience. And so then they have more capability to deal with the challenges.
Yeah, I know. Look, I it comes to mind when we're talking especially about hiring. I know a startup that the founder says they hire from the first time, the moment a person applies, they make a decision about hiring that person within 24 hours. And I'm just like, I don't even know how that works. And I don't think that sounds smart at all. Like, he was really proud of that fact about how fast they moved. And it's like, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. I mean, basically all the advice I know of is like, hire slow, fire fast. If you're hiring fast, you're going to mess it up. There's no way you're going to be able to get people who are perfectly fit. But he was really proud, like, we're so fast and fast moving. And he had major hubris and ego and all these other things. He just thought he was the smartest person ever and didn't know what I was talking about. And I was like, all right.
And that's okay. I mean, everybody has to kind of learn the hard way.
Do they though? There's all these books. There's my podcast. There's all these things out there that should tell people there actually is a pretty good way to do things. Yes, there are always the outlier examples.
Yeah. But does a person actually have an open mind to absorb?
A lot of people don't.
Most of the people are trees. They're not plotted.
They are trees. I like that. Most people are trees. So okay. So hiring your team, what are the things when you got that team in place? What are the systems and processes you put in place right off the bat? And what do you try to outsource right away?
I put weekly connections. I always have whether some type of tracking mechanism. I like Asana. I'm not pitching Asana, but I like Asana. So I use Asana for everything. Some people like Trello, but you have to have a tracking system of all the key initiatives, the strategies, the tactics, all that kind of stuff.
And if you use it, I assume too. I find a lot of companies, even if they do that, they don't always use those systems.
We're religious on it. We don't use email. We use Asana. There's a tracking history. Everyone should follow along. If there's an escalated issue, we use like WhatsApp or Slack for that. Like if we need to talk about an issue. And then if it needs to escalate beyond text, then we'll just have a call. But we always have a weekly call. Sometimes then I had like with the whole company. And then I have a separate call specifically just for customer success. And then a specific call for product and tech. But yeah, I mean, the key thing is consistently talking and working together and solving problems together. It's less about like the silver bullet. It's more of just that consistency of communication, engagement, execution, feedback, listening, alignment, learning, growing kind of thing.
And are your teams all remote or are you in person?
Yeah, we're all remote.
Why do you believe that's the right way to go?
I mean, I think for me, it's the right way to go because when I used to have to go into an office 5 days a week, as an autistic person, it was super challenging for me to have to be always on, 40 hours a week. Anytime anybody came to your desk, there's like an expectation that you've got to engage them in your best face, So for me, like strategically going into an office or strategically meeting with people means that I can have my game face on then, and then I can turn this computer off and go on a walk and decompress and get my energy back and all that, right? So for me, I like it because it works really well. For me, it also gives me more opportunity to spend time with my son and with my wife. I don't know how people did it 20 years ago. Like dads probably never saw their.
Basically, I remember that with my dad. I mean, he would come home when we were basically in bed, ready to go to bed, either asleep already or about to go to sleep. And he'd finally come home from the office and he missed out on a lot of nights.
So I love that about the flexibility. I think my team loves it because they get to work with really talented people. When your recruiting pool is not 25 miles, but it's, 5,000 miles, then you're able to get talent that will probably be a better fit for you. I think on the outsourcing question, I tend to keep like the really high value activities inside.
How do you define high value?
Repeatable activities are low value activities.
Yeah. So repeatable is good. What about other things that they may not be repeatable, but areas you're just not specialized in?
I think like accounting and finance, you don't need to have that inside. Bookkeeping, none of that needs to be inside. Depending on what type of company you're in, marketing may or may not need to be kind of inside. Depending on what type of company you're in, the people that provide the support for customer success don't always have to be inside. You do need a person inside that's managing the strategy and all that. So that's kind of outsourceable. If you're kind of in a business that has lots of operations, you could probably outsource a lot of the operations pieces. I think that what's important is which workflows inside your company are going to create the 10x value, and don't outsource those.
I like that idea. The mindset, the 10x workflows, don't outsource everything else. Why is outsourcing better in your mind for the things that aren't going to create 10x value? Like what is for those founders who don't have this experience, why is that a better way to go to outsource the
Managing resources is time intensive and challenging. So if you don't have to manage the resources and you get a good output, even if the price tag is 30% higher, the amount of effort and time that you can now reallocate to a 10x value workflow it just can't be understated. Like, it's so important to focus on the right workflows.
Yep. No, so true. Are there any other key things around like remote that you think is important to make for a successful remote team? So I'm very pro remote myself personally, but like, what are the things that you do or you think about to make sure for a successful remote team?
Yeah, I think there's three things that I would say. One, video.
Really?
Like, anytime that you're engaging with a person, get on video.
You mean like just
reading or whatever. It doesn't have to be like if you're on Slack.
It's not just like you're sending a message on Asana or something. It's if you're going to have a conversation about a real thing, don't do voice call, do video call.
Do video call, yeah.
Totally.
Because you need to see the person's facial expressions. You need to see the nonverbal cues. You can tell if a person's really having a struggle time on the video versus over the phone. It's easy to mask.
We had a senior leader here for a while who basically refused. He sort of said, like, I refuse to do video calls most of the time. He had some reason why it wasn't going to work for him. He wasn't okay with it. I said, look, for our culture, we just have to have, like, you need to be on video for any calls you're doing. Like, if you want to do one-on-ones with me without it, my direct report, maybe I was okay. I forget if I was sort of okay with it, but like on team calls, you have to be on video. Like, that's just the culture we have and you have to do that. And I think it's critical for virtual as well.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is people that work remotely create stories in their head that aren't true. And so you have to make sure that you stay fairly engaged with every individual all of the time. And as a leader, I like make intentional notes on my calendar. Just, reach out to this person, reach out to that person. It doesn't I don't need to talk to them about like a critical business item. It's just like doing a check-in, right?
You give them a phone call? What do you do?
No, I do a text, Slack, so they know I'm thinking about them. We have a catch up. I'm like, you have that issue? Should we jump on a call real quick? So there's just a lot of, you want to make sure they don't create those stories, which they do. All humans do. And then they're like, I thought, and I'm like, well, why didn't you ask? And so
a lot of people don't ask. They have these ideas and they don't ask. I will say, by the way, just FYI on that, I do the same thing. I actually use a async voice tool to reach out to everybody in the team and try to check in at least every 30 days with people. I think it's a relatively new experiment for us, but I think it's working decently. Voice I find better than text because it's not as good as video, but it's better than text.
It's great. I'm a slow adopter I'm a fast adopter on some technologies and slow on others. But I did just start doing the voice memos to people, and I do find that that's more engaging and interesting. So
it is.
Call out. And then the third thing is just coach people that they have to ask. They have to be their own advocate. You can't possibly know what's going on in their life, in their head. So it's up to them to be their own advocate. Be your own advocate. Be your own advocate. Be your own advocate.
Yep.
Those are the three things that I'd recommend.
Those are great. Going back to CX stuff briefly for a little bit. Are there any hiring signals that predict a really good CX person?
So I think that when you look at the heuristics of an individual, there's some questions that you can ask people to determine, like, are they a service-oriented individual? Is it, and you could even ask a simple question like, hey, you work in Starbucks as the barista. This customer comes up and they ask for a coffee that you don't currently serve today. What is going to be your response?
Mm-hmm.
And the person that says, hey, I'm just going to tell them we don't have that on the menu, and they have to pick something on the menu, that's not a CX person. The person that says, hey, well, I'm going to hear what their order is. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to see if it's possible with our ingredients to make it. I might have to get approval, but I'm going to try to see what I can do. And if it's possible, I'm going to make it for them. And that's the right CX person. Like, that's a simple question, but how somebody answers that question will tell you whether they're a CX person or not.
Yep. No, that's great. What about the cultural side of CX or cultural side of teams in general? Like, how do you create a high level of confidence, high performance, team building or team success for a customer success team or just startup in general?
I think you have to start with three main things. One is there needs to be a vision. Two, there needs to be strategy aligned to the vision that people are bought into. And if someone's not bought into it, then you need to let them go and make sure your team's always bought into it. And then the third thing is execution. We need to deliver against that. And now out of that will come that culture that you want. Part of your vision might be to be a people-focused company. Great. So what's the strategy? What's the execution? Part of your vision might be, the largest cloud company in the world that delivers X. Great. What's your vision? What's your strategy? What's your execution? I think if you have those three things, whatever those are, and then you have core values that sit on top of those that manage your decision-making, then I think whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to be successful at.
You mentioned advisors and that stuff. How do you go about identifying great advisors? Like, it's actually interesting to hear you say advisors. I don't personally know if I subscribe completely to that, but it's also possible maybe I haven't found great advisors. So like, how do you go about finding and identifying someone who's going to be a great advisor that you actually want to give it equity to, you actually want to have conversations with on a regular basis?
I think you have to find an individual that knows something that you don't.
How do you find that person?
Usually the way that I found it is through my network. I don't usually reach out to cold advisors, but I'll reach out to my network. Obviously, this is another reason why it's great to be a 40-year-old founder, because you have a network. And so I reach out, I'm like, okay, so I'm building this AI business for gaming, for Quimby, right? Okay, so I can't get into these 5 major platforms because I don't know anybody. Can I get an advisor that knows somebody that is willing to give me advice on how to do that? Okay, great. I'll get that advisor, plug him in.
Got it. And so you're identifying your problem and need you want solved, and that becomes that advisor.
That's right. And then I don't require them to be heavily engaged. So they're a point and shoot.
It's like, I need you to help me with X problem.
That's right. And then here's your shares. And if I have another problem, I'll engage.
If they don't hit that project, do you not give them the equity or not all the equity?
No, the equity is based off of time. You're gonna have some good advisors. You'll have some not so great advisors. You can't get caught up on the small amount of equity you're giving an advisor. You have to get more focused on like, what's the problems I'm trying to solve? Great. 7 of my advisors worked, 3 didn't. Then I won't renew those 3. I'll renew the 7, right? You're never going to hit it out of the park with advisors. I think the most important thing is never let your advisors over influence your business decision-making. They're a good education point, but they're not. You own the customer. You own the product. At the end of the day, you make the decision, but the more intelligence and information you have in making that decision, the better.
Yeah. You're sort of someone, I think, who's like kind of an expert when it comes to scaling companies as well and doing that quickly. What's a key strategy for scaling a startup without burning out?
So I think that if you go through that process that I mentioned earlier about figuring out, customer market fit, traction, those types of things, if you have the ability to scale profitably, because if you scale profitably, you won't have burnout. Because you always have enough people eventually.
But are you maybe missing out on moving fast enough to build that moat, to your moat point?
Possibly, but so scale profitably if you're bootstrapping. If you're not bootstrapping, you have plenty of cash to scale on profitably. But make sure that you're thoughtful about how you're using your money, because you'll eventually run out of it. And so when you're scaling unprofitably, you should always have a plan of action to like, how am I going to get to profitability? What are the key metrics each month that I'm going to be watching and managing kind of to get to that? At the end of the day, there's always going to be more work than there are hours in the week for anybody, any founder. So you just have to choose which are the high value workflows, the 10X workflows that you need to focus on, because you don't need to work 100 hours a week. You need to work whatever number of hours you need to work, but they need to be 10X value hours.
Okay.
And that's what I would.
What do you think separates the entrepreneurs who succeed from those who don't? Like you probably in your 40 plus years have seen a bunch of people who've been really successful and a lot who failed and washed out and are not even entrepreneurs at all anymore. So like what leads to the most successful ones?
I think the first thing I would say is just don't give up.
Yep.
Like just because you had 4 failed startups, it doesn't mean your next one's not going to be the thing. I mean, all that you're getting a PhD on how not to do a startup, right? So don't give up. The second thing I would say is go through like a mechanized process to identify product market fit, customer fit, those types of things, and be willing to walk away if there's not a fit. Like a lot of founders don't want to walk away because they've invested 6 months of their life. Well, you just have to like walk away. If it's not going to work, walk away. And then the third thing that I would say, don't be afraid like to go back and learn something at a bigger company and then go back and do your next startup. Like, cause there may be like things that you don't have, skill sets that you need to go learn for a couple of years under a mentor or an industry or whatever, and then go back and do your next thing. Or don't be afraid to do your startup on the side while you have a main company, and make sure your startup is a solid fit before you go guns blazing into it. Any of those things.
What's the biggest entrepreneurial risk you've taken, like biggest bet risk that you've taken that's really paid off for you?
So when I bought Linda's, I mean, I used all of my own cash for it, and I've scaled the business with all of my own cash. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big risk, but it's growing and I'm learning and I made some mistakes and, I've had some good successes and, but it's, it's more stressful to use your own money. That's for sure. But at the end of the day, like bet on yourself. If you can't bet on yourself, then who can you bet on?
That is exactly true. So a little bit of a quick lightning round. What's the biggest founder misconception about success or entrepreneurial excellence in your mind?
Hockey stick growth.
Why?
I mean, 5% of companies are going to have hockey stick growth. 5% are going to become unicorns. Like you don't have to actually build a large company to have amazing success and wealth. You could build a $20 million company, a $100 million company. It doesn't have to be huge. So don't get stuck on the unicorn. Get more focused on what's the problem you're solving and how you're creating value.
Yeah, I love that. Just create value. What's your favorite failure that's led to a breakthrough?
So I think for me, when I was at Linda's in the early days, I spent $300,000 on ads to help grow the business. And my ROAS on that was under a 1. And what I learned was like the way that ads are set up don't work. And that led me to create Foresight. But I had to take that $300,000 lesson of my own money to learn that. And I didn't have the Foresight solution after I found the problem. Super stressed for a long time, and then finally figured out the Foresight solution. And then now I've turned the corner. But yeah, it was a big challenge.
What is a daily habit that makes you a better leader?
Every morning I wake up and I meditate.
For how long?
10 minutes.
And then how long ago did you start that?
4 or 5 years ago.
It's been great.
Yeah.
It's great. Work-life unity. How do you manage that? How do you think through work-life unity in general? What does that mean to look like for you as a father, spouse, and obviously like founder?
Well, I think that you just have to focus on what's most important to you. The most important things to me in my life are my wife and my son. And while I want to do great things in business and I want to be innovative and I want to build and scale and have great purpose and value, there's really nothing more important to me than my wife and my son. But they will always win in the prioritization conversation. And then if you have that as like, what's the priority? Then you're like, okay, you sit down, you talk, in my case, my wife, you sit down and talk with your spouse. In some cases, I talk to my son about this. And I was like, hey guys, this is what's going on. This is the plan for the day. This is the plan for the week. Papa has to do this. Mama's going to do this. Anna's going to do this. And, we work it out every day, every week. We just partner together. We never just let life keep going all of the time. And I think part of it might be because my son's autistic and I'm autistic. And so if we all talk about it, it's easier for us all to function as a family because we're very structured and organized type of people. But you just have to talk. You have to know your priorities and then talk about them consistently. And if your priorities need to change, you need to adapt quickly and not get worked up about it, And if there's like situations where you're just like, hon, this is a prize 0. I'm sorry, but I need you to take this on for a day.
It's a team.
It's a team. Then she takes on and then she comes back and says, hey, I got to have an outlet. I need to go somewhere for 2 days just to recover. And like, great, you go recover. I'll close everything down. I got kiddo, So you just have to do that. That's really what it's all about because she has things she wants to accomplish in life. I have things I want to accomplish. There's things that we want to accomplish as a family for our son. And so it's just about consistently working together on those things and letting your ego go. And remember, it's not about you. It's It's about us and we, right? Not I and.
Yeah. What's best one-line advice for a junior CX hire?
Is your customer coming back?
Are they returning? What's a underrated CX metric?
Revenue correlation to customer satisfaction.
Is that because like you can have revenue, but if they're churning later, it doesn't help you? It's something about churn?
Well, it's more about most CX professionals don't pay attention to revenue. They only pay attention to CSAT. So if you have a CSAT correlation to revenue, then you know the impact of what you're doing every day talking to a customer, what that impact has on the company bottom line. Then you can share that impact with the executives and they understand more the value of CX.
Okay. What's the most overrated productivity hack that you think is just overrated productivity-wise?
Multitasking.
What's your, and the last one, is there a single piece of advice, or not is there, there is, give me a single piece of advice that you would say everyone should follow for becoming an excellent entrepreneur? Like if you boil all this down that we've talked about, how would you boil it down into this is what you need to do to be a fantastic entrepreneur?
Know who you are, know who you're not, exit relentlessly on who you are.
Jonathan, that is great advice. How can people find you, get in touch, maybe ask you to be an advisor to them? Where can folks find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Chief CX Officer on LinkedIn. You can find me at jonathan@lindas.com.
Excellent. Jonathan, your time is precious. Thank you for spending some of it with me and my audience. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for the time.